Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the witnesses for appearing this afternoon. If I could, I was looking at a study from the Federal Reserve entitled Findings of the Diary of the Consumer Payment Choice that found that in the year 2020, last year, the cash payments decreased by roughly 7%. Credit card share payments increased from 24% in 2019 to 27% last year. That's the percentage of the payments. Square, which I think we all know is a digital payment system, also found that the number of cashless transactions last year increased significantly. Uh, Professor Zwicky, first to you, can you project if Congress did nothing, regulators did nothing, in 5 years, what do you think the makeup of payment types will be, and roughly what will the percentages be, if that makes any sense?
Yes, it does. I think that these trends are clear. Obviously, we had an acceleration last year, both because a lot of places just started doing remote ordering, online ordering. For example, restaurants that did sort of curbside pickup, that sort of thing. And so what we saw were a lot. We also found it more difficult to get cash. So I think people were reluctant to go to the ATM or the bank or whatever because it was difficult. And so we saw while people were spending cash less, they were hoarding cash more during the same time. So I think that it's we'll probably my guess is we'll probably revert to the long term trend going forward, but maybe a little bit more. A lot of people have made the transition now. A lot of people who didn't do online banking, for example, now have done online banking. People who were unused to paying with electronic payments have done it, and there's a huge generational change going on where younger people really of some use cash, but a lot don't. So I would say we can look forward to 5 or 6% growth a year in these electronic payments and a dwindling share of cash as well.
So, Professor, you used an interesting term a moment ago, generational, which I think all of us are focused on. We've talked about we've talked about urban districts. I have a rural district, which is slower to change.
That's right.
Can you can you inject generational uh, and apply it to districts that are more urban or more rural that are slower to change or may not have the resources to change? Does generational make a difference in those types of areas?
Absolutely. And we documented this in our CFPB task force report. There is quite clearly things going on with generations, which is that the Gen X generation, for Gen Z, I'm sorry, are the first generation that does more mobile banking than online banking. And you have to go all the way back to essentially the baby boomers to still find a generation where people do much in-person banking and it shifted online. But you're right, there are very important issues involving rural populations that I think are understudied. And we called for more research in the CFPB task force report. I mentioned it here, which is rural populations face unique challenges with respect to access to the internet, high speed internet service, mobile payments, and that sort of thing. And so I think that it's worth exploring in greater detail what the unique challenges are of your rural populations in order to promote financial inclusion and access to electronic payments.
Thank you, Professor. Mr. Bear, if I could, for you, if I could go backwards for a moment and ask you generally the same question that I just asked the professor. 5 years from now, if Congress doesn't take any action, regular states don't take action, can you forecast what you think the percentage roughly for the various payment methods would be, digital versus cash?
I'm sorry, Congressman, were you directing that to me?
Yes, sir.
Um, I don't have any reason to dispute Mr. Zwicky's numbers in terms of the trend lines. However, I would say that the trend lines, if those trend lines hold, there will be millions of consumers who depend on cash who will find it harder to continue to do so. Now, I think that there are real societal harms that occur if that continues without adequate safeguards being put in place. And I think that Congress has a role to play in making sure that the seniors, the immigrants, the low-income consumers, the handyman and handywomen that Congressman Waters talked about, are not left behind. I would also point out that the access to the infrastructure, the banks, has been dwindling. Between 2014 and 2018, more than 1,900 banks were shut down in low-income areas than were opened. And I think that's emblematic of the financial industry's embrace of a cashless economy that unfortunately does tend to harm consumers in low-income areas.
Thank you. My time has expired. I yield back.